Live from St. George, Grenada, good morning and welcome to day 3 of the Caribbean Internet Governance Forum and the 5th Caribbean Youth Internet Governance Forum. Good to have all of you with us today. I note that many of you have been here since day 1, and so this shows interest to grow, to acquire knowledge, to get more information to develop yourselves in your craft and to help the Caribbean on the way forward. Some housekeeping matters as usual. To our in-person participants, please have your cell phones on silent mode. To our remote participants, your microphone and camera are muted by default. These will only be activated if you are invited to speak. We ask that the conversations, comments, and questions posed be professional, on topic, and adhere to the CTU's Code of Conduct for events and meetings. Thank you so much in advance for following these rules. Should you experience difficulties, please email us at events@ctu.int for assistance. Also, please note that the agenda, presentations, and bios of speakers during today's event can be found on the CTU's website, ctu.int. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Government of Grenada and the Caribbean Telecommunications Union, I would like to say a very special thank you to a number of partners. ARIN, ICANN, LACNIC, ISOC, and Glenelg Natural Spring Water, right here in Grenada. Today's session starts off with the hot topic segment, Caribbean AI Strategy, the Caribbean AI Forum, and next steps. To take you through the session this morning, I invite forward Dr. Craig Ramlal. He is the Executive Director of the Artificial Intelligence Innovation Center at the University of the West Indies. Dr. Ramlal.
I think Mr. Burke will be doing it.
Mr. Burke, okay, Mr. Burke will be conducting the session as the replacement? Okay, all right, very well indeed. So Mr. Edmund Burke is here. Come straight up, sir. And Mr. Edmund Burke is the Digital Director for the ICT Division, Ministry of Information and Communications Technology in Grenada.
Okay, good morning to everyone, and it's a pleasure to be here. And I'd like to say a pleasant good morning to GC of the Mr. Rodney Taylor and Nigel, and to Mr. Vincent Roberts, Chairman of the NTRC, and all of the other government officials and participants here. I see we all feel this morning with the hot topic as we continue. I know it's day 3. I guess, I'm not too sure if we had a hot night last night, that's why, but it's good to be here. And I was given the task of presenting the Caribbean AI Task Force report today, which was presented earlier this year, last month in Trinidad, at the CTO's forum. And Dr. Ramlal has trusted me, who is chair of that task force, with that responsibility. Okay. And may I add that the task force was constituted through the Caribbean Telecommunication Union, led by them, and the task force is made up of the entire Caribbean, represented from different stakeholders, experts in the field, and a broad range of participants. I'll share that slide in a bit. This first slide indicates that the growing market of AI and what's happening. And I would like to just say that the market is projected to expand from approximately $539.5 billion to US $4.8 trillion by 2033. And we will see how we can benefit or have not benefited from that. The global AI market expands, and so what does that mean for the Caribbean? Well, despite the LAP region generating 6.6%, as you saw or seeing on the slide now, of the global GDP, the region is currently captures a mere 1.1% of global AI investment. Within the Caribbean and sub-region, the deficit is even more, and it's even more acute. One can measure that in many narratives of AI enterprise, a region that has, and for us, this number is in the single digits across our many countries. This is a map that represents the global concentration of AI in the region and internationally. And as you can see, who are the benefits of AI? It remains heavily concentrated in certain geographical areas, certain economical and technological dominated countries. Notable AI models are available in some data sets. We can see that, as usual, the US, Canada, Germany, Israel, who else we're seeing there? The UAE, China, we cannot forget China, has been one of the big players and participants. Switzerland, Netherlands, Austria, and we are fortunate, and we'll speak to Austria's study tour in lower down. These are all of the big regions' participation in AI. Connectivity has always been an issue, and there have been many efforts made throughout the Caribbean to have the use of broadband and connectivity at a higher percentage. And as you can see, most of the connectivity throughout the region are within 75 to 80% connectivity. And through the Universal Service Fund, for most of the countries, they have been able to expand broadband penetration and broadband connectivity. The thing is, what are we using the connectivity to do in terms of a positive way for AI in the Caribbean? We still have the issue of affordability in some instances where the rates can still be lower. And in some of our developing states that use the internet service, across the small island developing states, a rate of 8.4% between 2014 and 2023 exceed the global rate of 6.7 over the same period. So we definitely have been growing when it comes to internet penetration and availability within the Caribbean. Over the past decades, between 10% and 40% of many countries' labor force have either immigrated or have immigrated to OECD nations, including more than 70% of the highly educated professionals in some states, among the highest skills loss rates in the entire world. And that has not changed, but we're hoping that we can have that reversed with having the right ecosystem and the right development strategy and plan within the Caribbean to have most of our high-end skills persons remain in the Caribbean and to curtail the drained brain that we continuously have to deal with throughout. So it's not like there are not opportunities, but how do we enable and create those opportunities? The brain drain problem is compounded and has compounded the labor issue. Ask yourself, what happens to the much larger existing workforce in occupation that AI is already capable of transforming and displacing, and at the same time, our skilled talent is migrating? It is estimated that approximately 26 to 38% of the employment across Latin America and the Caribbean countries are exposed to generative AI in some form. Depending on the country, approximately 8 to 14% will be affected by AI in some way, while approximately 2 to 5% fell within the category of presenting a partial for full automation. But that 2 to 5% in one of our Caribbean countries accounts to approximately 60,000 jobs. Those percentages are high for women than men because of the job types. Now, I would like to tell you a little bit more. What we're seeing here is part of the issue of a data problem, where the region appears largely absent from the global data sets. For example, those who use to track global AI infrastructure in speeches, languages, images, or from simple development of usual services, the global AI models are trained, of course, overwhelmingly on data from outside the region and not from the Caribbean, where speech and language models, in particular, perform miserable. Worse on Caribbean English, Caribbean Creole, than on the normal built-in AI models. There are two things. May I pause here and just ask a question? Anyone can tell me which AI model exists within Latin America and the Caribbean? Which large model? Going once, going twice. Going, gone. Anyone want to make a quick guess? And I'll make you. And the reason I'm referencing it is because we're speaking here of languages. We're talking about the community. It is LATAM. It is called LATAM GPT, and you can look it up. It's not a popular one, but it is one that is open source and was designed for Latin America and the Caribbean, and specifically to address the issues of, we'll talk about sovereignty of AI and all those stuff later on, but to address those issues and components. So it's something you learned today, right? You know that at least a country's position at the bottom of the capability index is still counted as observation that can inform policy and investment decisions. And in a country that does not appear in the underlying data at all, well, in comparison to a country that does not appear in that underlying data, it would not be a part of the analytics frame used in the model's global AI capacity. Small states may be missing from broader readiness indicators altogether because the underlying indicators are not consistently collated to be reported by national statistics and offices. And secondly, because we are underrepresented, the risk of algorithmic bias, as we know, and exclusion, and the erosion of information integrity and the rights, and already visible in how AI systems currently perform for the region. This is the AI research gap, and every other capable like infrastructure and governance standard, even talent pipelines, can in principle be built by adopting external models to the Caribbean conditions by importing. But we can't import sustained research and innovation. It is the activity through which the region produces AI systems rather than consume them. And we know that's a big problem. Right now, we're all consumers. Anyone here would have done their own model, AI model, in any form, any test. Not even in a sandbox, not even in isolation. Okay, let's go back to the old days. Those of us who would have done a lot of database lookup and queries. AI started then. It's now that it's available in higher processing speed and power in today's world. So the question for the Caribbean is not whether or not research activity exists. Several universities and small number of firms are already producing it. But whether that activity is organized, sustained, and support exists, and the support exists so that we can convert it to deployed or deployable products, exportable services, and regionally owned intellectual property, rather than dissipating into isolated pilots and publications that generate no further economic activity. In larger and more mature innovative systems, the businesses sector carries much of the cost and risk associated with applied research and commercialization. And that is a major challenge across the OECD. For example, where businesses accounted for 73% of the total research and development expenditure in 2024. The Caribbean startup finance is considerably thinner and smaller, where many technology ventures remain dependent on funders' savings, family and friends supporting, and formal angel networks. A follow-on investment remains limited, with simply to do not have the number of venture capital. We do not have, the number of venture capital, angel investments, and sizable markets to scale. The region's financial systems also remains oriented principally towards banks, financial retainers that has the potential for loss-tolerant equity, stage technology, and ventures. This is against the Caribbean's documented skill immigration problem from a weak domestic commercialized pipeline. AI is a moving target, and we are worryingly veering off course. And that's a major concern. So how do we fix that? it will be impossible for a single Caribbean nation to resource what we can control in terms of systems. List normal, the minimum amount of energy and the minimum number of resources, the necessary self-correct. Individually, our markets are simply too small. Individually, our human capital is too thinly distributed. Let's list the financial support, the computing power, and the institutional burden is significant. CARICOM is only, as a small block collectively, this is not a new idea in terms of us moving together as a CARICOM block. The challenges is known, and that CARICOM remains the only regional block of comparable standing globally, without a binding or at least an agreed collective AI governance instrument. So when you look across the world, the Caribbean is the only one as a collective bloc who has not had, well, we can speak to that now because thanks to the CTU, and now we have championed the AI research, and now we have the report that has been presented to move in that direction as a collective bloc, and having the governance framework in place, the AI strategy in place, and policies in place. If we stay fragmented, how do we command commercial market share necessary to demand localized data sovereignty and customized algorithmic auditing for multinational AI providers? Furthermore, where high-level policy commitments do exist, we need to protect against implementation gaps. Commitments cannot remain, we are not a region of report writers. The Caribbean must aggressively pursue the strategic option of interoperability, in this case, call it harmonized AI. And we've been talking about that throughout these sessions for the last couple of days of harmonized approach. And I could recall when I met Mr. Taylor in Trinidad in 2023, 2024, where we were talking about the possibility of renewed harmonized regulatory space within CARICOM. And he shared that, and today we're moving on with the shared vision of having that harmonized regulatory space. There's one within the OECS countries, ECTEL, but there's a CARICOM need. And similar to AI, we cannot continue to do these things in isolation. We have to do it together. So what does that look like? What we want is sovereignty. Often we look at governance philosophies to communicate and cooperate effectively across borders without without sacrificing domestic regulatory priorities or cultural values. So it is about cross-border, it's about harmonized approach throughout the Caribbean. It is one single ICT space. And so it makes sense that we move together in the same AI space. And there are a number of reasons why that was highlighted earlier in terms of infrastructure, in terms of governance, in terms of resources. The AI task force was constituted and led by Dr. Craig Ramlal, and the team came across from the entire Caribbean with persons represented from private sector, stakeholder, NGOs, private sector, well, I mentioned that already, national agencies, and the task force was also supported by international bodies like the ITU, the CARICOM Secretariat, and we also consulted with ECLAC. During the CTU's 31st General Conference of Ministers in September 2025, the resolution to establish the CARICOM AI Task Force within 1 year, that is where the mandate was given to have a harmonized policy and recommendation for coordinating AI within the region, and with the adaptation which is supposed to be in 2026. In fact, the ministers had asked that we actually do it a lot faster. So in 1 year, in December of that said year, December 2025, during the AIIC's launch, the interim report was produced and distributed to the public for review and consumption. Members of the task force also attended several conferences, TV events, and panel regionally and internationally, discussing the recommendations and receiving feedback during 2025. And the latter part of the week in 2025, there was also inputs that were given via email from other stakeholders. In 2026, CARICOM Council of Trade, and Economic Development on Information Communication Technology recognized the work done of the AI Task Force as important to formulating of regional harmonization on AI policies for CARICOM and CARICOM member states. We now stand in July, less than a year, and now we're in August, as I'm presenting it here, with the resolution and to release the discussions, and our final recommendations. So this is the final presentation of the group, the AI Task Force. I would also like to point out that as part of the working group's international tour, we did an AI study tour of one of the popular, just as how Anguilla has AI. Malta is known as AI country because of its AI development that is happening there. And we also did another tour of Austria as well as part of our study tour. There are 7 main pillars that I would like to highlight that we looked at in terms of recommendation for AI on topics such as data compute, governance, the economy, education and skills, the public sector AI, resilience, and regional voice. So these are the main key pillars and areas that this report is based on. First, we must build a shared regional data and compute infrastructure. Earlier, we saw that our high digital engagement rests on expensive, externally controlled systems, which most of our data traffic and computing capacity located outside of the Caribbean. And no matter which models we talk about, it's all outside of the Caribbean for now. Rather than every country attempting to build and do it alone, we recommend that harmonized data rules, distributed regional infrastructure, open standard, and climate resilient systems that reduces costs and dependencies and fragmentation. So it's self-explanatory, the infrastructure, the resilience, the redundancy, reduced cost, harmonized approach, less fragmentation would definitely help us to move our whole AI agenda forward. We might ask where there might be HPACs or high computing systems existing. And I guess later on someone will tell me where in the Caribbean they do exist. Governance, and ethics. And looking at the standards relating to that. The Caribbean needs a harmonized AI governance framework. And that is important. Having an AI strategy, an AI governance framework, and then an AI policy. It's important in terms of us moving forward. Because if we're a small region, and if we have to talk about infrastructure, interoperability, connectivity, shared data, shared platforms, as we are attempting to do from the OECS and extended now to CARICOM, it's important that these frameworks are in place in order for us to be competitive as a Caribbean bloc. The recommendation is not to adopt exact global standards, but can be built on the frameworks such as the UNESCO established common requirements for transparency, risk, procurement, and bias, and that allow each of the states to implement them according to its regional circumstance. So, as you know, the CARICOM heads of ministers would have adopted the UNESCO AI plan 2027 to 2030. And it speaks to a lot of policy and legislative framework in terms of governing AI within the region. And so we also recommended that we look at that harmonized approach, but also allowing room for each country to have its own tailored version, if you want to put it that way, in order to meet its own legal requirements and other circumstances. So, sorry for being late with that slide. The fourth area, we need to have a strategy that is tailored rather than a single training program, which can already seem that businesses lack skilled workers, highly educated professionals, continue to do? Migrate, and they're migrating in large numbers. The thousands of existing jobs that may be transformed or displaced by AI. The responses must therefore span basic AI literacy, both from a practitioner level training, specialized research capacity, and also the pathway for workers moving into high value analytics and supervisory roles and quality assurance. This is very important because part of our challenge that we continue to have is that we're saying that jobs will be replaced by AI. we're also saying that jobs will be created. It's an opportunity for creation of jobs in AI. But we still do not have the skills required, the certifications and skills that is required within the Caribbean to address that. And we're saying that the approach to having a harmonized approach throughout skill training throughout the Caribbean is critical. The fifth area where governments become the proven ground for responsible Caribbean AI. Rather than beginning with high-risk application, governments such as can first test AI in its limits and its limitation, high-value public service, while requiring vendors to provide transparency and evidence of performance. These pilots should be generated and share regional knowledge, because no single Caribbean country has the resources to independently test every system, neither the vendor and implementation models. So in the Caribbean, as part of our study tour, I remember Dr. Ramlal asking the question in the EU, if we have to participate, if we have developers here and have developed a tool, how do we participate and use that AI model and share? Not necessarily an AI model, but an AI application, and use that in the EU or participate in the EU space. And there are sandboxes and regulatory frameworks that we have to adhere to that is high risk in order to participate in that region. And it's the same that we're suggesting should happen here in the Caribbean. And the governments should lead that. The sixth area that we looked at, is natural disaster and climate resilience. Between yesterday and I think the first day when we spoke of infrastructure and redundancy, we know what we're plagued with within the Caribbean. And resilience is critical in any framework or any structure that we have to design within this space. The same infrastructure dependency discussed earlier becomes most dangerous when we have hurricanes, floods, and other hazards disrupting communication and public service. A shared multi-hazard early warning capability, climate infrastructure, and AI-supported agricultural tools would address immediate regional risk, while also creating practical demand for data, compute, and technical capacity developed under these other recommendations. So, as indicated, we spoke about subsea capacity. Some of the cables are old. We talk about satellite resilience, spearheaded by also some of the discussions through the OECS, through ECTEL, for example, with Starlink, and also throughout the Caribbean, where the low orbital satellites are given an opportunity to provide some of the resilience and operate in the space. So with that, I would like to end the presentation. That brings an end to the presentation of, I missed this one, regional leadership and trade. Well, that is critical. Let me just touch on it because I missed it. Finally, the Caribbean must speak internationally with one common voice. And we talk about global trade and interoperability. That's critical. From an infrastructure perspective, if we speak with one voice, we will command and have more leverage in terms of negotiating with either the bigger players, but also having the recognition that we deserve within the Caribbean space. So with that, thank you very much, and I wish you all the best as we move towards the panel discussion on AI. Sorry, yes, any quick questions? I know I gave you one. I asked you one. Any questions related to the report?
Thank you. Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Rodney Taylor, CTU.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. But I can't allow you to walk off the stage without interrogating you. In particular about the slide which has that the CARICOM is the only, I took a picture, comparable block without a collective AI instrument. And maybe you can put it back on screen for the audience. I did mention last night that Grenada has a lead. Oh yeah, I'll wait for it, yes. No, I think it's...
Oh, sorry.
No,
Yeah,
you got to go the other way.
Yeah.
Keep going. There we go.
Yeah.
CARICOM, red flag.
Yes. Right.
So Grenada within CARICOM, and I was thinking of the best way to ask this question, but Grenada has the lead in CARICOM on science and technology. CTU is the CARICOM institution with responsibility for telecommunications and information and communication technology. We need to change this picture, right? We need to agree on a pathway by which we can address this, because we do not lack the talent, we do not lack the capability of taking advantage of this new wave of technology in AI and so on. And I want to challenge you because of your position within the government of Grenada, which has the lead responsibility for science and technology. And we as CTU, as the lead institution within CARICOM, that this picture is not acceptable and that we need to address this. It is not really a question.
Right.
It is a statement.
It's a statement.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Taylor, for that statement. I would just comment briefly, and Grenada is a lead in ICT, quoted ICT, science and technology and innovation within the CARICOM space. Our Prime Minister chairs the minister's portfolio throughout CARICOM in that space, and I chair the technocrats, the technical officials throughout the region. So hence Mr. Rodney's challenging statement, not a question, but also a call for action, and that we definitely, and wherever I go, also supported by CTU, CARICOM, ECTEL, and the NTRC champion support by Mr. Roberts, we have been definitely trying to change that narrative. And we're working closely with also Dr. Ramlal to actually see how we can have an example of that collective approach, not just from the OECS, and we look at CARICOM, but seeing that the OECS is a block that exists in and have harmonized approach in many different spaces, single currency, free movement, single regulatory space. And now, which I would share light later, maybe at our panel discussion, data protection, a harmonized approach. All of these are critical as it relates to AI and dealing with AI sovereignty. So we're going to champion the collective approach, because if we understand there are different components, but you have to start somewhere. There's legislative, there is infrastructure, compute power, spread across the region, and not one country, as we say, the costs already. So I think from the quoted, why we went ahead from the quoted ICT and the ministers adopted recognized the work done by the task force and CTU, and also the UNESCO approach, is because we see the urgent need, and it was highlighted based on the task force mandate by the ministers. It is urgent. And we're loosely using AI, but it's also an education for the public as to how we can have our own models, or not necessarily large learning models, and the reasons why it's important. We talk about sovereignty earlier. Part of what we discovered and looked at when we did the EU tour was also sovereignty of AI, and at the application layer where we can use models and have them isolated and stuff like that. So we are going to champion that, to answer your question, and move it forward. And thank you very much for making that statement. Yes. Go ahead, Deputy.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Maybe that way forward could be one of the things explored in the panel discussion that's upcoming. And mine is more of a question. You made early mention of LATAM GPT.
GPT, yes.
Right, yeah. Right, and that it was an open source thing and so on. Can you provide any history of how that came to be? You know, where was it developed and who might have contributed to its current state?
I don't have all the history on it, but it was a combination of the Latin American countries and the Caribbean. And the focus was to use open source as much as possible to create that model and allow every country to take that model and continue to further develop and isolate. So, for example, I talk about the languages and our heritage, and that was part of its key focus. Within that LATAM application, you can definitely use it, for example, the Caribbean. And for speech, for example, Creole, we have St. Lucia, we have Dominica. We have Jamaica with their version of Creole, right? So all of that, Haiti, it can be used. It's not popular, it's not fancy as the other ones, but that was part of the history. But hopefully by then, I'm not sure if you have any additional information you can help with, share, but I'll appreciate it. Or anyone in the room, yes.
I was just wondering if it was if it came out of academia, for example, if it was different universities that were collaborating, did it come out of a commercial space? Yeah. I was just wondering, it's there, but where did it
come from?
Where it came from?
I'll double check it. I'm not too sure if Dr. Ramlal, who is online, if he's able to share any light on that one in particular. No, Dr. Ramlal.
Yes. LATAM GPT, where did it come from?
Yeah.
So that one, I'm actually not too sure about that one. I believe what happened was it was not built from a foundational model. It was fine-tuned from a series of data, including Portuguese and Spanish and indigenous text, and so on, and then was distributed out to the Latin America countries. The Caribbean, we do have one. We created one at the University of the West Indies at the Artificial Intelligence Innovation Center, but we created a foundational model. It's not that large, but we have not done something like what LATAM GPT would have done. Got the countries involved and distributed it out so that they could use it for public service. We did not do that, but that is possibly something that we can discuss. I think that one of the major issues that we have in doing something like that is one of everyone goes to resources fairly quickly, but that is actually not the major challenge. The major challenge is one of adoption. When you have front-end models like ChatGPT, Claude, and so on, and you can pay $20 for subscription, it becomes very difficult to compare your model, which of course is open source, but it is not as competent as these fixed proprietary models that people can build applications on top of. So the adoption there becomes quite limited. So if we can somehow build a comparative model that is open source and is capable in its very narrow task, I think that is possibly the direction that we should take. It also has to be married with a series of public service applications, things in education or things for using for governments and so on.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Yes, one more question.
Good morning. Chad Fraser, Sonova. It's both, well, it's not much a question, but more comment.
Okay.
You know, we're looking at AI, and we know it takes significant resources to train models. I think, and my suggestion is, maybe we should look at the adoption, the application, on top of open source models, because we're seeing now that the open source models are quite capable. All right. The question is, can we put the infrastructure in place to host them? And then we can vertically integrate over time. So we can say, okay, we're comfortable with the application, meaning that we have the protocols, we know where they can be used within government, whether it be for reviewing files or for reporting or for whatever use cases we have. And then once we're comfortable and we have our benchmark to measure the performance of these models against our use cases, then we figure out how can we fine-tune, if there is a case for fine-tuning, because we are seeing now that even the general LLMs are quite capable with prompting and with RAG and other techniques for enriching it with proprietary data. Mm-hmm. So I would like to propose that we consider the infrastructure and focus on application, find genuine use cases where it's valuable within both private and public sector. And then if there is a justification for fine-tuning or training proprietary models on the ground up, then we pursue that. But I think low-hanging fruit would be to host the capable open source models.
Thank you very much for that. And I think that also, that contribution confirms the agreed direction in terms of having our own within the region localized and starting somewhere. And as Dr. Ramlal indicated, UWI also would have done one and would have had it out for testing. I'm not too sure of the name it was called. I guess Dr. Ramlal can share that shortly. And the infrastructure, as you rightly say, Trinidad has HPCs. I'm not too sure how many, Jamaica, UWI may have one. I'm not too sure how many HPCs that are spread throughout the Caribbean for that computing power and hosting for us to move forward with some of that training and model. But part of our direction as we talk about how do we promote AI and push AI is having HPACs within the region as well. Because it's one thing for the application and using open source, but you need to house it somewhere in order for it to be, because you don't want it to hallucinate, you don't want it to, right. So the infrastructure is critical. All right, any other quick question on that? Or suggestions, recommendations? Okay, well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
We invite you to remain on stage, Mr. Burke, because you are going to moderate the panel discussion, AI and Data Governance for Caribbean Public Institutions. Now, This panel discussion, ladies and gents, will focus on issues around public sector digital development, including AI procurement, AI in education, privacy, and data management. So facilitated by Mr. Edmund Burke, Digital Director for the ICT Division, Ministry of Information and Communications Technology in Grenada, and the panelists who are virtually, they are Mr. Ravi Deonarine, Manager of Infrastructure and High Performance Compute, Artificial Intelligence Innovation Center at the University of the West Indies, and Mr. Shernon Osepa, Consultant with the CTU. Mr. Burke?
All right, thank you very much. Actually, Dr. Ramlal will actually do that part, and I will be a participant.
Okay,
All right,
very
so
well.
I'll just participate. Thank you very much.
Okay,
So, Dr. Ramlal, sorry, over to you.
Thank you. Dr. Ramlal, you next.
Yes.
Thank you very much. No problem. Well, I assume I'm coming across quite well after the intervention, and I actually thought that the panel was handling the questions, these rapid-fire questions, fairly well. So we could have asked the panel and have the audience open up the questions. But I see that we have about half an hour remaining. If I can get an audio cue or something like this when the time is coming to an end, because I don't want to take away from your break time. So I guess we'll quickly move into this panel. We have heard from the Caribbean AI Task Force. We have seen, this has been emphasized, that we are the only regional bloc that does not have any sort of agreed set of recommendations. So even for getting binding recommendations, we have no agreed set of recommendations. There are many regions out there that have done this since 2024. It's 2026. So we have a lot of catch-up to do. And with the catch-up, we have a lot of work to be done so that we can even participate. Because when you catch up, all you do is catch up. You don't actually participate in the conversation that's happening because you're still trying to figure out what people are trying to say. All right. So the discussion that we're going to have now, I don't know if Mr. Tracy is in the room there, but he always tells us that the AI task force is not a task force of report writers, it's a task force of doing something. So this entire discussion that we will have is a discussion on what happens next. So we have spent considerable time across the region looking at what responsible and effective AI should look like. Now, we have provided these set of recommendations. The next challenge will be in implementation. And we are looking at public institutions in particular. So what does it mean? What does it mean to move from principles and recommendations to some practical decisions? What do governments have to do? What should be done nationally and shared regionally? What infrastructure do we need to put in place? How do we need to procure AI systems responsibly? Do we procure it? Do we build it? What do we need to do? So the idea is operationalizing these recommendations, and I would like to start with Mr. Burke because he has been in the hot seat for the entire morning, and I don't want his seat to cool down. So, Mr. Burke, Grenada is already implementing digital identity, enterprise architecture, interoperability, e-payments, and so on. Very fantastic stuff. So, if we now overlay the CAIF recommendations on top of those programs, what should Grenada actually do differently, if at all, within the next 12 to 18 months? Or what should it deliberately not try to do nationally because it would be better done at the OECS and CARICOM level? So essentially, it's a question of interoperability. So if you have to integrate what Grenada is doing right now to what the OECS and CARICOM should be doing, what do you think that connection should be? What do you think the CARICOM should be? And what do you think Grenada should be to be interoperable between the national level and the regional level?
Okay, tough question. What should we do within the, say, 12 to 18 months? Well, of course, we should avoid duplication, and that's part of the key component and element. So I'd start with what we should avoid. And trying to build sovereign foundational models or isolated models, and it's not the way forward. And so a regional approach to let's say, a regulatory sandbox for the region will be important. Nationally, the immediate focus, I think we need to prioritize, is more into our core digital transformation pillars, like digital government services or digital health, e-agriculture, and have a heavy focus on education, which we already started in terms of the CAIF project and the Digi4 project, where we have been doing a lot of training and skills training. It's a major pillar, and I think we need to focus on that and to prepare our workforce. As we say, there's a major gap, and we need to also maybe look at procurement guidelines as it relates to AI within the region. We in Grenada definitely will be looking at it, and it's important that we have safe procurement guidelines in place in order for us to move forward. In terms of regional and the OECS, foundational models are complex. We talk about regulation and testing, and do we have the environment to test some of the models that we talk about developing? And we should not do that in isolation. We have to do that together in terms of our infrastructure. We also have to look at the resources and ensuring that we have not just the physical infrastructure in place, the human capacity, but the regulatory framework. And we'll speak to later on some of the data sovereignty and also data protection issues that we have to address. So these are some of the things we should do and we can do, but there are things we would avoid, which is the key component: duplication and incurring significant costs. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And I think in keeping in that same light of duplication, resources come up. We have mentioned resources. So I want to get this next question to Mr. Deonarine. So in the report, we shared that it recommends shared, distributed, and modular compute rather than every country having a facility for each national group, right? What at an engineering level, what then does that mean? What is the right Caribbean architecture then? And should we be thinking about regional GPU HPCs? Should we be thinking about smaller national clusters that connect to them? Should we be thinking about edge compute? So what are the essentially the workloads that we should be thinking about when we talk about national AI systems? And what then is you would suppose is a good architecture for a series of HPC systems that does this for the region?
I think that a good, robust architecture should actually include all of these and should really be driven by the workloads themselves. So we have a spectrum of solutions. We have, on one end, we have compute on the edge and high-end on-premises compute. And on the other end, we have use of a cloud service or hyperscaler. So for compute on the edge or on premises, that's good for small-scale inference, industrial use cases where we have privacy-sensitive applications, right? Or maybe, as someone mentioned, the use of open-weight models, maybe smaller open-weight models might be a good solution there. And then on the other end, for hyperscaling, renting out a cloud service allows for more dynamic use. That's good for when we have a variable workload. We don't know what is the certainty of the workload, so it doesn't make sense to invest in infrastructure, right? We can scale up or scale down at will. But unfortunately, with a hyperscaler, using that service, if you have a known high workload, you have this overhead, which is the overhead from the service, the profit margin of the service. So we have do it yourself, own the infrastructure, run it on premises, and then we have rent it, right? And then in between, we have options for regional and national data centers. So I think all of them have their place, with the co-op version being particularly important for workloads where we have some strategic interest in keeping the workload local. So for example, government services, health services. So for these this infrastructure, this national and regional infrastructure, then the key decisions then would be the size and placement, as we spoke about climate resiliency, and then having resources to invest in this infrastructure.
Okay, okay. So you're suggesting that we have a mixed bag then for multiple things, but and I just want to keep on this same topic here because I want to move to Mr. Osepa next. But you know, one of the questions that the people will have, especially in the room right now, is one of sovereignty, which I think you captured by saying that the national systems should, at some point in time, keep their own infrastructure. I think some of the worry is that can the countries afford these national systems, these sovereign systems? So maybe a cost. Can we appropriate or say what a cost of these things would look like for national systems as opposed to when they're using it for private use? So for getting hyperscalers, for national use, this is national EIDs and kind of those kinds of things, right? Do you have an idea of what that cost will look like?
I don't have an idea of what the cost would look like, but I think for something that is nationalized, something, as I said, is if it's some kind of co-op system, that cost can be shared across government and maybe local business.
Okay. So then, okay, let's then move on to Mr. Osepa then. So if we talk about this shared regional infrastructure, that will create efficiency, but it would also create a concentration of risk. So the idea then is, are we going to have a single platform that can compromise identity, which a cloud environment and a regional infrastructure could have for the sake of getting sovereignty? So if we do design a regional AI infrastructure, right, are we putting a single point of cyber failure? Like, what is the pros and cons? Kind of walk us through if this is a good idea to do, and if not, then you know what are we getting ourselves involved in if we move ahead with a regional infrastructure that hosts government data on it?
Yes, okay. First of all, thank you very much for the question. I think it's quite important for us to, when we talk about regional integration, we must not make the mistake of focusing on, let's say, regional or centralized dependence. There is a big difference when we talk about regional integration and centralized dependence. And this is the reason why, especially when we talk about regional integration, it may scare some people because they might think, okay, we're going to have centralized dependence. And that's not basically what we would like to do. So infrastructure should be designed around federated and resilient architectures. So what we can do is, for example, to focus on national control over identity and authentication. So that should be in place. It's very important to have what we would call like multi-cloud and multi-jurisdiction deployment. So it should not be somewhere only in one particular country. It's also very important also for us to focus on segmentation, identity, data, and AI services to avoid that when something happens in one particular jurisdiction, it will or could affect all the other ones. And that will bring us to what we could call the regional cyber resilient exercises, and exercises that need to be done to ensure that we remain connected and also in a secure way.
Okay.
That would be my contribution basically with respect to that question.
Yeah, sure. I think that works because you do get the benefits of regional infrastructure and things like that, but you can't secure. So then, if I want to stay on that same topic, but this one is for Ed. So now ECLAC is now moving towards moving the OECS from separate digital islands to a regional something, right? So what would that mean? So they're calling it a regional digital spline. So what would that mean technically and institutionally? Is it that for we are talking about common APIs, we are talking about interoperable digital identities, shared data standards, mutual recognition? Who has if it is all the above, who has the authority to then make those standards stick? That you would be developing this regional digital framework, if one were to say it, for the OECS.
Thank you very much. It's a tough question in terms of especially the latter part. It's how we're going to get that to stick and enforce. But from an infrastructure perspective, definitely common APIs would be applicable. We have to share data standards and data sets. Also look at the regulatory framework, especially when it comes to identity. And there's a difference between identity as we move along within the OECS space as well, versus a digital ID. Identity is a base, and that's why I said it's a base on which you identify a person. A digital ID is just a tool that you use that is used from your base identity. That does not mean you take up your biometric combination with other data sets. So standard data sets across the region will actually help. So be the API spin framework and be it standard data, standards for data sharing definitely would help. It's tough for it when it comes to that key data because we talk about sovereignty of data and data having to be, when it comes to identity, reside in a particular country. Maybe we can talk about some of the infrastructure related to that as well. It's important. And with ECLAC, we have been championing and moving along with the idea of data embassies so that there are two components of that. If we have common APIs, we have shared infrastructure, we must have laws, legislation, and policies across the region and the OECS space in order for you to continue to move freely with your health records, freely with your identity, etc. But a quick way to start is from an infrastructure standpoint, it means shared facility, be data centers, be data embassies. And in data embassies, that model, we can at least, every country within the OECS country, within the OECS islands can have its own sovereignty space and operate within the data center. In terms of the enforcement and authority, that's a tough one in terms of the regional governance framework, and we have the OECS Authority and OECS Commission, and then we have the broader CARICOM and CARICOM quoted ICT. And in order for this, and we have agreed from the quoted ICT, and then also within the OECS, that once the technocrats are involved directly in each territory, we can move this agenda forward. And it is possible. And the framework is similar to what we have like ECTEL, but with an improved version and model to it. And we should be able to have that enforcement happening. Specifically to AI, it's a bit tough. However, whether or not we build on an existing institution like ECTEL that exists or a second one with the focus of AI is critical. But we also have to be mindful of the regulatory space as well. And within the OECS is mainly 2 providers, and within CARICOM is similar with 1 or 2 in some of the spaces. So in terms of enforcement, it will be the OECS Commission, and based on treaties, because each country operates based on treaties, and the bilateral arrangements. And that is how I think with that working group, we can have it enforced within the OECS and then in a broader CARICOM region.
Okay, so I think, that was a hard question. I agree. So let me ask somebody else another hard question in same suit. And this one is going to go to you, Mr. Osepa. We heard about the regional infrastructure and how it can be enforced and how we can construct something like this. But if we're talking about cybersecurity, we have national CSIDs. So, but if you have a regional infrastructure, you would have something where the infrastructure itself is at a particular level of maturity, and all of the countries will then be at that particular level of maturity for the infrastructure. But the CSIDs are not at the same level of maturity in multiple things, in experience, in their own national infrastructure, in their own capabilities, right? They are at different levels of maturity. We have the CARICOM Impact Cyber Fusion Unit, the OECS Cybersecurity Roadmap, and we have other regional mechanisms. So during a major cross-border cyber attack, who then should actually be, who should be in the operational command for something like this? If we do have AI in a piece of regional infrastructure, and there's a massive cyber attack that happens across multiple countries, what information should Grenada or Jamaica or Trinidad CSID then be required to and legally permitted to share in something like this with a regional mechanism, right? Within the first hour, let's say, or 24 hours of the incident, with something like this happening cross-border. We know that the OECS states have already been working on a common cybersecurity roadmap through CARD-TP. But in your mind, how do you think this kind of process should happen? If you have a regional infrastructure, you have national CSIDs operating, but it's national data in that regional piece of infrastructure.
Yes, I think, and you did mention it, it's quite important for us to make a distinction between the national level and the regional level, because when we talk about the national level, you may find all those discussions with respect to sovereignty. So that is why we need to be a bit careful how we focus on that. So, but focusing on the regional level, it's quite important if we have what we call the SOC, Security Operations Center, operational. But again, it's all about how what is the governance with respect to this. We need to have some very clear collaboration discussions, how we're going to deal with this, because if we don't have this in place, then it will become a problem. But it's very important, for example, on the regional level that we focus, for example, on to do some analysis, for example, malware analysis and digital forensics. We can also focus on the threat intelligence and threat hunting. It's quite important for us to have, let's say, the AI security specialist in place. And there are some barriers, as I did mention, that we need to ensure that one way or the other they are mitigated, or else we will be getting ourselves into trouble. For example, the sovereignty concerns, we need to deal with those. Legal and information sharing gaps. And it's all about trust. And one of the things that we have seen, for example, especially when we see commercial banks are being hacked, they don't want to share that information because they don't want to lose for the clients, customers to lose trust into them. So that is why still we need to have a mechanism in place where this information should be shared. I don't want to use the word like mandatory, because mandatory is always a bit a challenge when you're dealing with governments and other entities. But we need to have mechanism in place where we are focusing on the trust and confidentiality, in order for, let's say, for them to feel secure that they can share that information. And for example, also what we would call the lack of a defined regional operational governance framework, where again, we can put all these stakeholders together and to ensure that they feel confident by sharing those information. But it will remain a work in progress because, as I did mention, especially the sovereignty discussions, countries, islands, we may say that we would like to collaborate with each other, but in one way or the other, we still are competing with each other. For example, just take a look, for example, at tourism. Why would you think that one particular country is announcing that they're getting a number of tourists visiting the island? Because one way or the other, they compete with the others. And I have seen, for example, I don't want to go astray, but I've seen, for example, countries mentioning, for example, or islands come to my countries because the crime rate is lower in my country. So why would you say something like that? It's because you would like to, in one way or the other, you're competing with fellow countries in the region. And again, if we can find a way how to deal with the sovereignty discussion, and then it would be much more easier for us to collaborate as well when we have these kind of disasters.
Yeah, I mean, the EU is not perfect, but they do it. So it's what works for us, right? In that case, I think we're coming down to this. This is the last question, and we open the floor, which I can't see, but hopefully Ed will help us with that one. So Ravi, this question is for you, and so I want to keep the train of these difficult questions that I've been asking, and it's all around this regional approach and what does that actually mean in operation. And so this is a tough one as well. So, it's one thing to put down on some AI infrastructure. It's an engineering problem, especially in the tropics, putting down this particular thing. But it's also a major economics problem as well. If we put down a Caribbean GPU infrastructure cluster, which is very impressive, that can serve for these countries, and then it operates at 15 to 20% utilization, then it's essentially a white elephant. So the issue then becomes, one, what should we be thinking about? Who should own this particular regional shared compute? Who gets the priority for it? Governments gets it, universities, startups, private institutions. What is the procurement model will look like? Because we have multiple countries have different procurement models for their AI system. So what would this thing have for its own procurement model? How could we keep this thing highly utilized? Because if any data center that is not heavily utilized is losing money. So how do we keep it heavily utilized? That's for you, Mr. Deonarine. Take it away.
All right, I have some thoughts on this. Let's see how coherent they come out. Okay, so above all, I think the infrastructure and the organization behind it has to be sustainable. It really should not be an aspirational monument. It should be something that is invested in, put in place, and used. What is our rational way to make sure that it works out like that? I think the key thing is it is an investment, and I think the key thing is appropriate scale. How much we're going to invest, and what we're going to build out, and run at the get-go, and then maybe leave room for expansion. So I'm thinking that maybe we isolate stakeholders, assess demand, assess workload, market research, and then possibly have stakeholders make commitments to purchase or fund baseline capacity. So then we establish some target for the scale of it, and then that could help to size the infrastructure, and then we have a headroom and a modular path for expansion if the demand grows. And likewise, if we have key stakeholders that are investing, they should obviously receive some sort of guaranteed or priority access according to their investment. But then the other thing is, even if they have that share, they may not use it. So there should be a mechanism to ensure that any idle capacity can be utilized. So it isn't just that because it's allocated, it is wasted. Idle capacity should be made available for other uses. I really not too sure about the appropriate ownership and operating model. But obviously the government should ensure that no single country or institution or vendor controls access. I do have some thoughts on, avoiding kind of technology lock-in or vendor lock-in. I think it has to be designed such that somebody could pick up and take their workload and go with it. To purposely design a exit or a migration path for the workloads so that the workloads can be moved. Work with standards, not brands. Make sure that workload packaging is portable, that data is portable. Use standard identity and security interfaces. Structure tenders so that the original supplier doesn't have an inherent advantage. That's my thoughts on it.
Okay, thank you very much. I think let's take one question from you. I know it's 10:31, and that the break is to be now. So maybe Ed, if you can help us with that, because we can't see the thing.
Okay, sure, no problem. And we'd like to just acknowledge the presence of the Minister of Digital Transformation. Thank you very much for coming. Question, any questions from the audience? Go ahead. And I do have a comment, Craig, thereafter.
It's Roy McEwen from the DTA. It's a statement and a question. So with regards to sovereignty, there's many different language models that exist. So Quen 2.4 is a 2.4 trillion parameter system that has to run on a data center. Then you have other models which are 3.7 billion parameters that can run on a laptop. So my question is related to how are we discussing sovereignty? Are we looking at it purely at the data center level based on models like Quen? Or are we talking about also language models that can run on a laptop and essentially just provide services for the user? From an organizational point of view as well, organizations can run their own LLMs and governments can run their own. So Jamaica has their own for their Creole, sorry, not Creole, Patois.
Patois, yes.
And Guyana has launched their own as well. So, and they are specifically targeting the preservation of their cultural language. So we've kind of like spoken about AI in terms of, a generic approach. Should we sort of have a more nuanced level, looking at AI on the different layers, how it can be implemented?
Yeah. So Craig, I'll just take the first shot at it and then you will come in thereafter. So thank you very much, Roy, for that. And at least I know you're paying attention attentively. The issue of sovereignty sometimes is seen as a dream. And sovereignty, when it comes to data and data movement, it is significant because most of us have data outside of Grenada, pertinent data. But data that is controlled, as you said, for localized and for government, that is critical data. So you can take it in stages. I'm in agreement with you in terms of the approach. Take it in stages, what are critical, what are of high security risk, identity type data, such that can be kept, but as you say, can preserve culture, and you can use the tools, but in a localized form, and then you can extend it beyond that to the localized data centers, and then the regional approach. But of course, the infrastructure have to be there to support the speedy communications and the isolation to avoid, as you know, models either hallucinating or getting outside data because you want it to be on your raw data. So that is why it's important that we look forward. So the tiered approach in terms of sovereignty, and there are different layers, as you rightly highlighted, is critical in terms of how we approach it. Dr. Ramlal and team, any further comments on?
Yes, sure. So Mr. Deonarine would have, his first answer would have been on this same core tiered approach to do that. And I want to stick in a point here, because oftentimes when we come to forums like this, the majority, and I mean, it's a fault of my own, because the majority of discussions we've had is for public service and public institution, but AI is not only implemented for that. And the major opportunity and potential benefits of these systems is in the development of Caribbean products and services that cannot live in a government data center. That is not appropriate for that particular type of workload. If you are looking at research commercialization type of activities, these are going to be very high, very intense, massive GPU systems that you need to have. So I'm in complete agreement with what the conversations we've been having so far in terms of if you are doing like national ID or EID, you are looking at cultural preservation and so on. You are looking at developing your own language models. You are looking at maybe small models that can help students at the CXC level or below. Those things, I completely agree. Those things can fit on laptops. Those things can work on national-based infrastructure that is not in the size of, for our countries at least, not in the size of 10 megawatts and up, right? Or let's say 100 megawatts and up, right? That is definitely not going to be that. We have small populations in the Caribbean as compared to other regions of the world. But if we want to look at products and services, develop products and services using AI tools, and we want to look at a regional approach to doing this, where countries, researchers, countries, small organizations, small to medium enterprises can get involved in, then we need to start thinking a bit more broadly on what is the kind of compute we want to have, so that we arm our people to be able to compete with the rest of the markets, to develop products and services, and then also to export those products and services to other markets, so that we get FDI and we gain the potential opportunities from these AI systems. I don't know if Mr. Deonarine or Mr. Osepa wants to come in.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. When developing applications, the terms of sovereignty came up with me a couple of times, and my main concern is really control of applications and data. So from my point of view in developing applications is, if I talking to a client and then the client says, well, we prefer cloud services so that we don't have to manage infrastructure. The next thing I have to ask the client is, are you okay with your data being subject to the laws of a different jurisdiction? And then there's usually a pause, and they usually say, we have to get back to you on that. So that's my experience with sovereignty.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mr. Osepa?
I think it's also, maybe let me focus a bit on the political aspect a bit. All politics are local, as they say, because one of the challenges that we have seen, for example, when discussing where that data should be allocated, and we are talking, for example, on data centers, you may have a data center in a given country, but when that particular politician goes back home, and how would he or she sell that idea for them to develop or to use a data center in another country. Because at the end of the day, sorry that I'm mentioning it, I mean, they're politicians. They would like to get some local votes as well. So this is also one of the discussions that we have seen. It's not always that what is best, but how can I sell this thing when I go back home? So this is also one of the things that it's our reality. I'm not saying that it's bad or good or whatever. It's our reality, and that's also one of the things that we need to take into consideration when we are coming to all the discussions or conclusions that we are focusing on.
Okay, thanks. So we have 2 more questions. Yeah, I saw his hand first, so.
Okay.
Sonova.
All right. Good morning again. AI data centers is a solution to our problem. The problem of inference or compute for training. Right? Have we assessed the problem? Have we done any study or collected any data around the consumption of inference within government or in the private sector? Because I think that would advise on the size and based on the payload, the types of workloads and so that are being run, the size of models that needs to be supported, and therefore the size of infrastructure that we need. We call it intelligence density increasing. You see smaller models being able to do much more. I think a really good action item coming from this would be to assess the regions or countries' utilization of tokens and what type of workload. Is it to jobs that could be done on a very small model, a 28 billion model, or do we need to go into the trillion-size models to run the workloads that we have? So I think that assessment would really help us to understand if we need it and what size of AI infrastructure we need. Maybe it's a good first step. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Anyone want to comment?
Yeah, I can go first, and then Ravi can go next. So there are many assessments taken place across the Caribbean region. There was of course, everyone knows about the UNESCO RAM that has been ongoing. There's also the UNDP-AIILA that multiple countries have also agreed to and been taken. I know that the other multilaterals do have assessments. What type of workloads are also being placed on what they are being assessed, what people are using these AI tools for. But it's quite difficult to appropriate a model size and a capability of a model size to a workload. You are correct that the intelligence density is increasing because we have at least discovered how to compress. So it's based on universal approximation theorem, and we are getting better and better at moving these nonlinear subspace projectors into smaller sizes, right? So that's essentially what we are doing with these smaller models. But the pathway that we have been taking and the world has been taking to do this is through knowledge distillation. And the issue with knowledge distillation is inherently biased on what the larger models are producing. See, the smaller models, most of them, at least the ones that are on the top of the list, you don't get to see what the data that they are being trained on. It's not open data, it's open weights, right, in the different classes of these models. So you don't get to see what data they train on. And then the last step, when they align the models, they are doing knowledge distillation based on larger models. So they are training these models as a learner based on a larger model, which is called a teacher, right? So this is the issue here. We are not sure, based on all of the models that we have, which one does the job the best. And so what from the beginning, when I said it, it seems that the default is that people are moving towards the front-end models and using the front-end models because it's a catch-all solution, right? Now, if we go ahead, think about it this way. If we go ahead and we run a test, right, and we assess, and we say, okay, well, we take 10,000 US and put it into an institution and say, institution, figure out for these workloads, which is the best open source model to use. With the rate at which these open source models are being released, how long will that test stand up for? How long will those benchmarks work for, right? Because within the time of doing that analysis, there's other models that people can also use as well, right? So I think we might have to think about it from a different way. We might have to think about it from we as the Caribbean figure out the major workloads, the common workloads that we have nationally across the board, and we then invest into taking an existing open source solution and building out the capability for that solution. Instead of going and looking at these open source tools and figuring out which one works best for us. It has to be inverse. We ourselves have to generate the data to fine tune the models, have a corpus of a large data set corpus, and then measure the capability of the models after we fine tune the data for it and see what is the appropriate way to distribute it. Should it be that it works on very small compute systems? Should it be a regional approach for that? What is it? And that is based on the case and the workload for that. I don't know if Mr. Deonarine want to also comment on this.
Yeah, I think it's also considering future, capacity for future workloads. I think we also have to consider the applications themselves. What is the trend in the integration of AI into traditional workflows? So what is the uptake, and what is the uptake? What is the size of the models that would work, and what is the volume, or the scale of the use, and then that would inform what capacity is needed to run it.
Okay. Shannon, any comment, or we can move on? Let's say move on, just from that question, sorry. Yes, I would not miss you. So I think both Dr. Ramlal and other colleague did hit the nail on the head, that overall it's a common approach. We are small islands with commonalities, and the designs are similar, so there's no need to replicate it in each island, but have a common approach to having that solution being done. And that is true, again, research, and I'll put you on the spot, Dr. Ramlal, seeing that University of the West Indies have been leading in a lot of research and have its HVAC and maybe can continue to lead in that area. Okay, GC, sorry.
Well, hi, good morning again.
I hope it's not another taxing question.
It's not a question. I make statements, not
statements,
questions.
Okay.
And I think you're out of time as well, but I would still state, in relation to this discussion, that in terms of sovereignty, that the region does need its own infrastructure. So we do need an AI data center. And if we look at it collectively as a region, there are only about 2 or 3 countries that could really house such infrastructure, right? In terms of land, energy, so power, energy, and cooling systems. And Craig has spoken about this on local TV in Trinidad, because this is a big news item in Trinidad, because the US has said they want to build a data center, AI data center in Trinidad. And I mentioned yesterday that the projected energy consumption is about 25% of the capacity of the existing energy grid in Trinidad, right? So it's Trinidad that is an oil-producing country, cheap energy, right? Of course, we have Guyana as well.
Of course.
They have the land, they have the water, they have the oil, cheap energy. So I think we have to agree at the regional level that we want this sovereignty. It's not an issue of cost, because if we're building out digital economies and investing heavily in digital services, we cannot be satisfied that all of our services are based in the United States or Europe or China, and that they can turn at the drop of a hat, turn off the switch and disconnect our economies. So I will go back to the fact that Grenada is the lead in CARICOM. CTU is the regional agency. And I think that we need to collectively agree where this infrastructure will be, that it is necessary, and it's not just a question of cost, how much it costs to build it, how much it costs to run it. It is like asking how much from a national security point of view, how do we invest collectively in this infrastructure? And I think that's very important for us going forward.
Thank you very much for those comments and the reminder. And as lead in ICT, we definitely support the approach and the model where, at the technical level, we all understand the importance of the infrastructure and know for a fact, and I can say that openly, that we are aware as to the capabilities of each Caribbean island and what that infrastructure that was partially discussed at the Third School of Digital Transformation in Jamaica in terms of, one, a physical location, keeping in mind all the infrastructure, the key component of power, and then resilience in terms of connectivity for the rest of the islands, and what that network or design and infrastructure layer should look like. And so we all agree in principle that that is how technically it has to happen. Despite and to Shannon's point about the political and the pulling and toying here, it's important that we already establish a fact, yes, we need our own infrastructure. Who might have gone ahead in some instances, we look at where they're at and we build on it. And it's nice to have a modern data center, but to do AI is a different story. And so there are clear indicators, and I think we can move forward steadily with that. And one more point as it relates to infrastructure. We are talking about, Shannon mentioned, as it relates to cybersecurity as well. And for example, within the region, we have, the fusion component of impacts. And, but Dr. Ramlal spoke about the OECS and the certs and what's been done on a regional basis in terms of the OECS. And for Grenada, we're building a SOC. We started the process of building a SOC itself. And as indicated, the key here is the model. One is not just to support Grenada, but the rest of the OECS countries. And it is not just about employing Grenadians, but as you know, from a cybersecurity standpoint, you can have pen testers remotely located, so we can get resources from the OECS. So it is to leverage. And then hopefully that SOC idea might evolve into a Caribbean one. And then we'll have one supporting the Caribbean and so forth. So we're all on board with you. And as leading ICT, we'll continue to champion that cause. So Dr. Ramlal, I know you're chairing, but I want to say we're out of time. And thank you very much to the entire team for participating in such a popular topic, but critical and important topic. Thanks again.
Thank you very much. Bye, guys.
Cheers. Okay, I have not seen the moderator, but I am looking at the agenda. Next on the agenda is the break, right? So thank you very much, and we'll now move to the break.
We're continuing on day 3. This is the final day of the 22nd Caribbean Internet Governance Forum. Ladies and gentlemen, in our midst is Honorable Ron Redhead, Minister for Digital Transformation, right here in Grenada. He is going to present on Grenada's digital agenda. Minister Redhead.
I think the guys have the presentation up. Let's just check it to make sure that it's working. All right. So, good morning. Nah, I ain't convinced. Good morning, everyone. Right. So the last 3 days, we've been having excellent discussions. But before I go into the presentation in terms of where Grenada is at, I want to spend a little time, first and foremost, recognizing the important role of NTRC in all of this, and also recognizing, to a large extent, the role that the CTU is playing to bring everybody together. And as mentioned yesterday, the conversation doesn't start with Grenada only. It starts with all of us in the region, and most importantly, it starts with us understanding what is at play. So my task is very simple, which is to say to you what Grenada is doing. So probably in just one brief sentence, Grenada is transforming its digital space and landscape, and Grenada is going to have connectivity, but moving that more so to the question of capability. So when it comes to Grenada's own push, over the last few days, as you know, we've been having the conversation, and that is a Caribbean conversation about technology and internet governance. And this morning, I want to bring that conversation home. Where we have come from, what are we building today, and where we intend to go next. So digital transformation can easily become a conversation about platforms, networks, data centers, artificial intelligence, digital identity. Then you have interoperability and all of the T's. All of that is important. Don't get me wrong. But the most important feature in all of this for us is the question of people. We can talk about all of this, but if it doesn't make sense to the average Grenadian man or woman, they would not buy into it, and it will be futile. So in other words, when the ordinary man or woman wakes up and they listen to us talking about connectivity, they want to know, would I be able to turn on my phone and get data in the morning? And I'm paying my bill on time. Is there any Flow or digital representatives in the room? And that is a question that they are asking. Our responsibility is to ensure that we are focused on the overarching goal, yes, but we must never forget how the ordinary man or woman in the Caribbean is going to is going to benefit from the impact of what we are pursuing. So these are the questions that matter. So I want to turn now to the first slide. And it speaks to advancing Grenada's strategic vision. And as you heard earlier on, we believe that the most important element out of all of this is the question of people. So ensuring that when we are addressing the whole question of the vision and the strategy and the question of linking connectivity to capability, the conversation has been about the connectivity. But the connectivity in and of itself can only go so far, can only reach so far. That is only one element. The question is now, how do we take that connectivity and build our economy? How do we take that connectivity and improve the opportunities that young people, for example, will have to become new innovators? That is a question that I believe lies before us. And the basic component of all of this, as we see it, is a question of people. So what are we going to do with all of that connectivity that we have? You have some of the large companies in Grenada, digital companies. You have one represented here, just walked in. And if he is to get more connectivity, and let's say Grenada is introducing the question of 5G, and we now have access to satellite technology. I wouldn't want to call companies' name, but we now have given and granted license to those. The question is, what are we going to do with it? Is it just to add another feature that we have connectivity, or should it now be utilized to turn into something productive that it can then turn around to manage the question of this platform? How will we fund connectivity? How will we ensure that that same connectivity can be maintained and can be bolstered in terms of what we want to achieve? And I will be brief to go through the first few slides or so, simply because I want us to focus on where we need to go. Now, as it relates to these 3 projects currently in Grenada, we have the CARSIP, we have the CARD TP, and we have Digi4R. All 3 of these projects are interconnected. One helps to establish the foundational question or issue of connectivity. The other talks about the digital skills required to be able to utilize the connectivity. And then finally, Digi4R talks about implementing and modernizing the systems that should come out of all of these. So the question one would ask, and I'll ask it in this room more so to the Grenadians, are any one of you familiar with any one of these programs? Grenadians, probably just show by raise of hands. That is all the Grenadians in the room? All right, much better. So that's a good start. It means that you understand, but have we been explaining those programs enough? Be honest with me, yes or no? Good. So do you believe we need to do more of that so that ordinary Grenadians can understand what is at stake and how they can participate? So as I mentioned, CARSIP speaks about establishing the foundational connectivity by expanding broadband networks to ensure the digital backbone can withstand any challenge. So we know, for example, we have the fiber optic cables, and I'm speaking to the choir in this sense for some of the people in the room, some who may be online and looking also at the social media live may understand as well, so they can follow. And CARD TP is about driving nationwide digital skills training and expanding technology access to ensure universal inclusion. Yesterday, we spoke about that question of the inclusion. And if we understand the inclusion, when we get to this point, the question of onboarding, the question of just ensuring that all of us in this room know exactly what these programs are about and what they are doing is critical. So we need to do more engagement with people if we are to realize the full potential as to what we are doing. And Digi4R speaks to the question of rapid expansion of digital government services, modernizing systems, and improving public sector service delivery. So, when somebody goes, for example, on the port, a lot of you know the time we have to take just to wait on the port, in some instances, just to get one laptop. You have to go to possibly almost 12, I'm just exaggerating, but you have to go to many different departments, pay here, there, everywhere, and then you could go, in some instances, to collect your items. So for the average Grenadian, what they would like to see in terms of digital transformation is that one-stop shop. They can go in, what time is it now? So it's about 11:45. They can go in 11:45 and leave by 12:10. Not hours. Not in some instances days, because you have to go and return. So that is a power and benefit that we want to see realized through the use of technology. And this is just one aspect as to what we are doing. So CARSIP laid the foundation for connectivity. CARD TP is going to help build the skills so that we could utilize the connectivity. And then Digi4R is going to expand the programs to help build that out throughout the community and help improve the question now of the inclusion. So CARD TP is very important when we talk about people living with disabilities and still being able to access the technology. So, in terms now of pioneering that digital public infrastructure, DPI, one of the things Grenada has been able to do is to first and foremost launch what is called the DTA. Because you saw the ecosystem in the previous slide. And so what the ecosystem is expected to do is to lay the foundation for standardization. But in order for us to have and achieve that, we needed a body to be able to manage that. This is Grenada's model. This is what we are doing. So we launched the DTA to help ensure that we build out that question of, one, you'll see it at the bottom there, interoperability, remove all of the silos, and ensure that the government systems that we are building under Digi4R, for example, they are able to talk to each other. I should not have to go into a government department in the same building, provide the same information, and when I go somewhere else now to pay, I still have to provide the same information. That's a no-no. So this is where Grenada is at. It is not just about the connectivity, but we need to build out the capacity to ensure that we are doing the things that can lead and drive the digital transformation. We are also working in terms of upgrading our health systems, in terms of upgrading digital records and telehealth. We've been doing tremendous work there. All right, it's on? Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so we've been doing tremendous work there, and it's important that we continue because as it relates to Grenada, one of the biggest challenges that we face is the question of access to information. Some people, and I can tell you just the simple thing as the birth certificates, some people struggle with that because they either did not have the information as to who their mother could have been, their father, that sort of thing. And so it is always a challenge sometimes to check the records. In Grenada, we have serious problem with the storage of the records. So the need to digitize it and get the records on an online system that is going to be secured, protected, etc., is important. And we are also simultaneously rolling out the question of digital identity. That is important because when we talk about safety and security, we would like to know that there is an ID where any one of us in Grenada can produce and all of our information can be centrally accessed, protected most importantly, but accessed to ensure that we can be identified as to who we are. Identity theft, as you know, is something that the world over has to deal with, and we need to ensure that it is protected. But a critical part of this whole component is to ensure that citizens can trust the information that other Grenadians may have access to, can trust that it remains. The worst thing is to have your business exposed. And that is one of the major threats with the digital space that currently exists. So when we talk cybersecurity, there is also the question of trusting that when we put data in, that it is not given out even within the systems that we build. So maybe building systems, for example, that will not provide the information to the worker, but has it stored, protected. They identify you by a code or so, and they can know all of the relevant bits and data, is where we need to be going. And DTA is going to help us lead the majority of that work. We see it in this way. Before I go to the next slide, I want you to understand. We are just building out the Ministry of Digital Transformation. Under the Ministry of Digital Transformation, we want to have the DTA play the leading role as the agency organizing all of the components from a digital perspective to make them work. One, to remove the silos. Two, to ensure that we advance the technologies and the capabilities within international standards, and that every ministry and department is on the same page, and most importantly, that when we talk about digital identity and the protection that is required around there, that everything is in line with international standards. So cybersecurity will play a very critical role for the responsibility of DTA going forward. All right, the third slide now, I want to just move quickly on some of the major initiatives that, I hope this is the correct slide. I think one item might be missing from this one, but that is okay. Some of the major initiatives that we have been working on. So when we talk about expanding resilient and sovereign infrastructure, two things come to mind for now that Grenada is working on. So we have, as I mentioned earlier on, the satellite technology. We've just passed this, sorry, not passed it, but given the right for one of the major players in satellite connectivity to operate in Grenada. When we had Hurricane Beryl, all of our infrastructure was down. And particularly for our offshore islands, Carriacou, Petit Martinique, there was great difficulty in terms of communicating with residents up there. And the only thing that was able to allow government to communicate was the Starlink devices. At that time, we did not have, in a sense, approval to operate the Starlink. And so, in some instances, yes, the government do break the law, but in a good way to facilitate the change we need. But the point is, it took Hurricane Beryl to tell us that we need to get to that point. But it should not have been. I know you agree with me, it should not have been. So when we talk about the plan and the vision and the focus, it must all intertwine into the great big plan that we want to achieve. So that's one. We have only recently approved a study to be conducted, and I want to thank CTU for this, in Grenada, to allow for a new undersea cable. I can tell you, many of you do experience internet connectivity challenges with fiber optics, and it's a challenge. But as the question asked earlier on, what sort of study is being done or conducted to determine where we go? So we are utilizing that question of the study to gather the data, to see what we can do, and hopefully allow Grenada not just to talk about leading in the region, but to demonstrate our capacity to be able to upgrade to the standard that can accommodate other Caribbean territories to move it forward. And then, as discussed earlier on today, the whole question of data sovereignty. So Grenada is about to invest in a second data center equipped with disaster recovery capabilities, and we are pursuing data embassies to address regional sovereignty. Why we want to go that route is there are tremendous benefits that can be derived from pursuing this specific policy. One, notwithstanding, as the saying goes, every 50 years, and G for God, God is a Grenadian, that we get hit by a powerful hurricane, but we are below the hurricane belt. While we do have our submarine volcano, Kikemjeni, there has not been any major eruptions in the last number of years. And so we believe Grenada, apart from everything else, is in a safe zone to be able to pursue the whole question of establishing a data embassy. Data embassy, while some may have the political concern with it, is about ensuring that you can store your data in a safe location and it can be accessed when necessary. Think of it as a digital embassy that is normally established around the world, where you have that exchange of ambassadors, etc., etc. So it helps, in a sense, to carry out some of the important foundations that we need. We also would like to encourage private sector to join in this journey with us. And not just Grenada's private sector, but regional private sector. So when we talk about the digital transformation, what we are saying to you is that we want to become the hub where everyone digitally is coming. We also want to become the hub for regional healthcare. So what that is going to help us do is, if we are doing that, people would be coming in. They would need to be able to store data. Businesses will be utilizing Grenada's network all so often. And this important aspect of the data embassy is going to be a critical aspect of ensuring that we have the capacity and we have the capabilities to be able to roll that out. So these are two important areas, as I mentioned, that we are working on. And we are hopeful that as we continue into 2027, the majority of them can become a reality. Cybersecurity. Is Mr. Dabio here? Right, good, see you, Ann. It's a major concern. It's probably one of the biggest threats outside of AI, which does more good. At least I want to hope so, for now. Cybersecurity is the biggest threat to all of what we want to do in the digital space. And so what Grenada has done was to establish the CSIRT. We have also a national framework. We successfully completed specialized cybersecurity training for 67 Grenadians to proactively monitor the landscape and respond to threats. And also on the question of data protection, we have aggressively strengthening data protection legislation to safeguard citizen and privacy rights. Critical, critical, critical. Critical why? Because as it relates to the question of trust, if citizens do not trust what we are doing, all of this becomes futile. Again, Grenada's policy framework is grounded in people and how people will benefit from what we do. So these are the three areas that we are currently pursuing in cybersecurity. Now, please do not mind. I hope that there will be a moment for question and answers. I do not want to go into all of the details. I got a joke yesterday on the table while we were having lunch. One of the waiters said to someone who asked, "What juice is it?" He said, well, the chef doesn't reveal his secret sauce. So in Grenada's case, I'm just brushing the surface, but I am certain that those of you who know, then you will know. So we're working in that regard. You agree with me? All right, excellent. So the other component to Grenada's vision is the question of digital skills, AI, and youth empowerment. Presently, Grenada does not have a policy on AI. So I say this not to project that it must be a limiting factor in terms of why we are leading, but to say that we need to now establish a policy and framework on AI. And I want to put out a public call to all the young people throughout Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique. Those of you who are using the technology now, those of you who are involved in learning technology now is the time to come forward to speak to the ministry to say what you believe we should be pursuing. That is the goal. We are not operating, and you heard it yesterday. If you're in a room and you believe you know every single thing about ICT, well, you're in the wrong room. You need to exit. We want to operate on the basis that in order for us to create the innovators, we must give them a seat at the table. So to all the enthusiastic young people, businesses sitting, utilizing the technology, and you have some level of expertise on it, this is your opportunity to come forward. Engage the NTRC, engage the DTA when it is established, and certainly engage the ministry to be able to share your ideas with us so that we can incorporate it into the overarching plan. So that's what we want to do. And we believe it is critical because, as mentioned yesterday in the feature address, what we want is to build Caribbean leaders who are producing these tools and building it locally themselves. It is not to say that we do not appreciate the sharing of the information and the knowledge from some of the larger countries, but we now need to take that knowledge that we are getting and build out our own unique components to help solve the problems that we so desperately need. And as you know, we have a lot of creative people in Grenada, the Caribbean, and the region that can utilize their skills if given the opportunity. So I want to zero in on the question of the AI and skills. Grenada is currently prioritizing, in fact, as we speak, I believe the Ministry of Education is meeting with a cabinet subcommittee to establish a number of centers of excellence throughout the length and breadth of Grenada. Those centers of excellence, while we'll have other specific focus, so one on agriculture, one on other components, building, that sort of thing, we want to be able to establish a center of excellence for digital skills and, most importantly, artificial intelligence. Why we believe so is because, separate and apart from having the policy and getting the information and the data and getting access to the tools, we need to have a continuous program of turning out young innovators in the area of AI. If AI is so important, why are we not having access to the schools to build the models ourselves? So if that is an issue, why should we not focus on building the institutions that can help turn out the AI innovators from within Grenada and the region? So that is important. Youth innovation, again, it's critical. We held the Girls in ICT Week and Forum, and out of those, we saw some very practical solutions in agriculture. And I want to tell you about agriculture, at least from a Grenadian standpoint. One of the greatest challenges is that we have good soil, we have good farmers, we lack the economies of scale to be able to tap into major markets, and we also, from a critical standpoint, lack the level of organization. Everybody doing their own thing. So you may have a little backyard subsistence farming, some people may have access to large lands, but it is not organized. We are not taking into consideration weather patterns. We are not taking into consideration how do we increase production in a particular crop, and when should we do that. So from a scientific standpoint, Grenada, just like the other Caribbean territories, we are just limping along. AI modeling can help us to fix some of those deficiencies, if not all. And so, in order to do so, ensuring that we build up the generation of people, not just young people, but people who can utilize the technology to be able to improve and bring about the solutions in agriculture is critical. But we need to build the foundation, and this is what Grenada is doing. And finally, the question of youth leadership. All of what we speak about here requires a ZA. Grenada is presenting itself to be that ZA. Youth leadership is important in all of what we are doing here, not because we believe it is important, but because it is the only way in which we could get all of these ideas that we have discussed over the last 3 days into practical action. I come from a school of thought where I believe most of the changes globally came about as a result of young people, starting probably all in the days biblically of Jesus Christ. He was a young man. And it is important when we talk about youth leadership, not just to limit youth leadership in some of the other simple areas and so on, but bringing young people at the table and encouraging them to be innovators, encouraging them and giving them the funding to be able to shape how we govern the internet is important. And this is something that Grenada is building out. We are hopeful that when we complete the National Youth Policy, out of that, we will have a section specifically dedicated to digital skills, digital transformation, and innovation for young men and women. So I want to move to the next slide and to talk about one of the other essential aspects as to what we are doing. Now, as I said, the connectivity is one. So we have access to it. But how we use that connectivity is another question that we must answer. When we talk about the digital economy, we can't just talk about the digital economy as to what the government of Grenada has to do. So very soon, the NTRC, in collaboration with the Ministry of ICT, is going to be organizing a conference where local entrepreneurs would have the opportunity to come and present. And I want to say this because I want to put them under the microscope. Over the last month or so, I've been having conversations with young people in Grenada. Do you know, for example, there's a business. He's just waiting for some seed capital to expand it. There's a business, and we're going to pilot it, hopefully in my constituency, St. George Northeast. There's a business that is going to allow for the gamification of mathematics. Now, in the region, we have a problem with mathematics. Historically, our people will always tell us, boy, math hard. So a lot of us grew up with that concept in our minds. And so whenever we see those numbers on the paper, we freeze up, tense, you can't think straight, and as you know, those one-day examinations ultimately would lead to failure. What this young man is doing, and his name is Darren, is going to be utilizing the elements of, let's say, something looking like YouTube, let's say something looking like a game, utilizing those elements, bringing all of it together so that young people could be able to start pressing the screen. I have a 3-year-old daughter, and if I give her this now, she knows how to put it on, she knows the password, she knows what to say, etc. While some may say that is dangerous, but it actually shows that that generation have the ability. So rather than using what we may call youthful exuberance and seeing it as something to be offended by, we need to harness it and to be able to solve some of the challenges. So when we talk about empowering local entrepreneurs, these are some of the things that we are doing. How many of you know that the Department of ICT has a little grant program to help small businesses with a little grant funding? Again, raise of hands. That's the problem. That is the problem. So the more we talk about these things, is the more young people, local entrepreneurs, small businesses are going to be able to get on board to start competing globally. We need to work together to make this a reality. And that's a real focus in terms of what Grenada is doing as it relates to the question of collaboration and the digital economy. But I want to also turn now to the shared capabilities. So when I spoke earlier on about cybersecurity, by no illusion can we sit and imagine that Grenada by itself can be able to tackle all the problems that exist in cybersecurity. So therefore, what is required for us is to ensure, one, that we understand our challenges are not unique and that the solutions can only come through a shared responsibility of the problem and specific to the Caribbean. If something happens in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, likely it will happen in Grenada, likely it may be happening in Trinidad and Tobago, likely it may be happening in Barbados, etc., etc. And so when we talk about sharing that responsibility, we also need to be concerned with sharing the knowledge, the information as to how we go forward and the framework required to be able to treat with this important concern of cybersecurity. So that is what we are doing. We're taking it step by step. As I mentioned, we do have a number of treaties that we are looking at. We do have a number of options. NTRC is leading the charge in this regard as to how Grenada can continue to improve its cybersecurity framework. But it is something that will not happen overnight. It is something that we are still learning, and it is something that we are committed to working together on at the regional and international level. So, this important concept of moving from connectivity to capacity should not just be another talk shop that we have here where we come and we express stuff. Yes, we may have goals, but I can tell you this. My biggest fear in life is not about having the vision to say what we are going to do and having the vision to express how we feel about certain things. My biggest fear is that we see and say all these things and we do absolutely nothing about it. Action, implementation, we need to build the capacity to be able to ensure that we implement what we say that we are going to do. Again, different regions, different territories may use different tactics. But what is important is to understand that all of us need to be on the same page when it comes to Grenada's digital transformation. And we believe that once we are like that in Grenada, the rest of the Caribbean can learn a thing or two in terms of what we are doing. So I don't want to give out too much of the secret sauce, but I could say to you, make sure you come to Grenada in 2027, where you would see a lot of the transformation taking place. Make sure you come to Grenada and you understand and you work with us so that we also can work with the rest of the region. And we can be able to build a very, very connected Caribbean, one people, one region. Thank you very much. I also look forward to any questions because I did not specifically, yes, Mr. Rodney.
Since you opened the floor, I would take advantage of that. Yes. First of all, thank you for the presentation that was so well presented. I was saying I understand why the Prime Minister selected you to run the Digital Transformation Ministry. No, I really am very impressed with your vision and also with your focus on the regional cooperation. Many of the issues you spoke about, including Starlink, because Starlink has reached out to us in frustration about the licensing challenges they have operating in the region. And of course, whenever there's a disaster, then everybody wants to connect to Starlink to provide services. We worked with a company as well from Spain, it's called Hispasat, to provide connectivity to Jamaica. I think Tariq is in the room and he can speak to that. But it is important, these satellite companies provide critical services in the aftermath of a disaster. But I also want to thank Grenada for its leadership on the new submarine cable that is being laid in the region and its cooperation to determine the feasibility of connecting that cable to several Caribbean countries in the region. Grenada has provided leadership not only in that, in terms of the submarine cable, but also on the early warning systems that we are working with right now with the World Bank. We are working with, for those who may not know, for early warning systems using cell broadcast so that people are warned of an impending disaster, whether it's hurricane, flood, tsunami, or what have you. And also, Grenada has cooperated regionally on the issue of smart seas, so providing connectivity for small-scale fishers at sea. So, again, it's not a question, but I want to hold you to task and say, based on your intervention today and your focus on regional collaboration, that I want to be able to call on you. Your Prime Minister in particular has a very, very specific role within CARICOM, in the CARICOM quasi-cabinet, and we will definitely be leveraging the relationship with you to ensure that the regional development happens as it should. The shared infrastructure is important. I mentioned earlier today the issue of building data centers in the region. Where does it make sense to build such data centers? It may not be Grenada. Yes, Grenada may need a data center for its own services, but where it comes to data embassies and shared infrastructure, AI data centers, there are only a handful of countries in the Caribbean where it might be feasible to do that because they have the land, they have the energy, they have the cooling systems, the water, and so on. So I just really want to challenge you and support your focus on regional cooperation and to affirm that the CTU is here to support you in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're working on the energy aspect of it, but Grenada certainly should be considered as an option. But I also want to touch a little bit on what you mentioned and see the linkage in terms of what we are seeing. Now, Yes, Starlink provides an opportunity for connectivity, but understanding how to utilize it, it may be slower than the normal fiber optics, but in the use of disaster mitigation, or at least communication, that is important. Most Caribbean territories have our infrastructure on the poles. So once in a hurricane or some type of major disaster that goes down, we have a difficulty to communicate. So the use for us in Grenada of the Starlink is not to replace our existing structure, but it essentially is to complement what we have and to bolster it, particularly as it relates to disaster management and mitigation. So that is important. Anybody else? Questions, comments? See a hand? Before you go, I recognized this young lady there, and then you will go. Sorry about that.
Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
On one of you said Grenada is investing in a second data center. I just have some questions about that. What do you think Grenada has the capacity to have that second data center? And also, would it be because the reason for that is for resilience in terms of disaster management, would it be on the same island, or do you intend to have it on a different island? Or, so I just wanted to understand the thought process.
Right, thank you, very good question. I am pressed to not mention whether it would be on the island or a different island, but what I would say to you is that we acknowledge it's an ambitious goal, first and foremost, but I think if we were to take away from yesterday in particular, notwithstanding that we have limitations and that we are small, this must not be a deterrent factor. It is a dangerous defeatist approach to say that we cannot do without first trying. It is. And so my message to all Caribbean territories is that all of us should attempt to pursue in some way or the other the clear understanding as to what benefits a data center will bring to the region and who or whom, whether it is a combination of islands, may be best suited to lead out that type of policy. Your second question may require some additional thought process, and I would allow technocrats in the room maybe to contribute if they see it fit on that specific question of the location. But by and large, from a policy standpoint, Grenada believes that it could pursue a lot of things, and a data center is one. Recognize. Yeah.
Yes.
It's on? Yeah, I think it's on.
Yes, being from America here, and I've been in this conference for the first 3 days, but a lot of the work that I have done, as I've expressed to the room, is in disaster recovery and resilience with the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, from the United States. But a lot of our work happens to have the impact of the nation in mind when we're doing disaster recovery and what that looks like. So I first want to say how important having these conversations with technology, with understanding the role of the entire region and how to bring that power and collaboration to the table when you're discussing the future of what the 21st century will need in order for a people to move in a direction and the innovation that you guys are discussing. So I want to commend Grenada for being on the cuff of a major conversation at a pivotal time in history. And not only being at that conversation, but also actively putting the infrastructure in place that allows it to speak to the rest of the nation on this critical topic. In saying so, I also wanted to not so much have a question, but also say to you how important it is to build these think tanks around mitigation and disaster, because you guys have suffered so many disaster, and because the country and the island is so subjected to natural disasters, it is the most critical thing that can happen when you are building from a recovery mind already as you're building the infrastructure of what it looks like to have a digital footprint. So in our work, in our line of work, we oftentimes don't understand or comprehend how important it is to put what it would take to recover a people in front of the economic impact that can happen right now. And so in building that footprint of disaster recovery, creating these data centers that will house the moments it takes you to get back up and running for utilities in order to communicate to those that have the resources to make this engine move to a better place and move into a different direction. And you guys have certainly planned out what that direction looks like as far as health is concerned, as far as the people is concerned, as far as economic power is concerned, and as far as innovation is concerned. So I am really excited to witness such a groundbreaking conversation, and I am here to be impacted by what you guys are doing too, because the rest of the world, rural communities need to know what you guys are doing as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the kind words. And I want to commend on this note the NTRC, the Department of ICT, and the CTU for all of their hard work in all of this and making it now become a reality. You know, as you spoke, the clear understanding, and probably I'll stop here, but the clear understanding, I don't know how much more time I have. Am I good with time? So I will end quickly just to say thank you very much. And, you know, the clear understanding is that we need to establish the rules. You have the policy, you have the regulators, you have the other stakeholders involved, and how do we ensure that all of this whole environment comes together? And particularly in Grenada's model, one of the things we want to do is to help bolster private sector involvement in this. Because if we were to use the old model and go with government only, the resources that might be available for all countries is still limited. But the private sector has the capacity to be able to bring finances on board, and they must be an integral part in helping to drive digital transformation throughout the region. So thank you very much for your comment, and again, to everyone, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Ron Redhead, Grenada's Minister for Digital Transformation. All right, as we continue with the Grenada Focus session today, titled Grenada Digital Resilience Lab, Lessons for Small Island Internet Governance, our next panel focuses on Beyond Connectivity, how ICT companies can drive digital innovation, cyber resilience, and economic growth in Grenada. Now, this discussion will explore how Grenada's ICT sector can move beyond the provision of connectivity to become a stronger catalyst for digital innovation, cybersecurity preparedness, business development, job creation, and sustainable economic growth. It will also provide an opportunity for industry representatives to share experiences, identify challenges, and propose practical approaches to strengthening Grenada's digital ecosystem. Here are the panelists, ladies and gents. Mr. Cleavon Noel of Meteorelic, he's here, please come forward. Mr. Cameron Philbott of Digital Growth. Mr. Chad Fraser of Sonova. and Mr. Oluwatosin Ishmael of Data Nexus Technologies. Ladies and gents, the moderator for this panel discussion is Ms. Tia Cummins.
Good day, everyone. It's wonderful to have so many persons in the room joining us, as well as online. We're delighted to have you to be part of this important conversation. I would just like to acknowledge the minister's presentation, and let's get this conversation started. So the minister just expressed the importance of private sector involvement. Given your role within your company, share with us your perspective in terms of how the private sector can strengthen our digital ecosystem. Chad, let's start with you.
I think Tia is picking on me now. Yeah, but yeah, I think I have, just to give a little background, Sonova has been around for 12 years. So we've been through a period when, we were pretty new and cutting edge, bringing very new things to the market. At time it was mobile apps was becoming popular. And we had to work through a time when connectivity was not as it is today, and up to current. And I think we have seen quite a bit of adoption, but also it gave us the time to recognize the impact, the work that we're doing, because what we do is build applications, right? We build software. We've been able to see the impact of the work we are doing on the government's delivery of service, as well as the private sector. And I'll give a quick example, if you don't mind. Yeah. So we, most of our small islands have CBI programs. That includes Grenada, St. Kitts. In fact, St. Kitts was the first CBI program ever in the world. So they pioneered CBI. And we have been able to implement our solutions in our local CBI program and dramatically improve processing time. If you know how CBI works, most of the countries, we measure the performance of these programs based on how long it takes to process applications. So we have been able to move, processing time from hundreds of days. And we had a record, I think, last year where we were able to complete a complete application in just around 20 days. All right, so we're talking about significant impact. If you understand the impact this program has on our country, it generates a significant amount of our income, monies that are used to invest in roads, schools, and so forth. All right, and we have had a similar impact in St. Kitts as well, and so we have been able to see how we are able to impact the delivery of government services over the years, and I think it's something that should be built on, and as we did with our CBI platform, replicated regionally. Yes.
Cameron?
Already collaborating. All right. Well, for us at Digital Growth, we have a greater focus, I would say, on the private sector. So you spoke a little bit about the government, so I'll talk on the private sector side. So we started back in 2020. We've gone through a shift of digital marketing, shifting more into digital transformation within the last 3 years. And The big opportunity I would say that we see to really be able to impact businesses is really to bring them together. So I'll give you an example. We have a software that we recently, we just soft launched it, so it's not officially released as yet, but it's purpose-built for the Caribbean, for businesses that are in manufacturing, wholesale and distribution, and retail. What it is an operations and sales system. It gives them the opportunity to be able to manage their procurement, their inventory, all of their sales. So whether it be a point of sale, whether it be wholesale, whether it be online sales, and even route sales, which is actually very big in our region. So it gives you the capability to do that. Now, in many of the industries that I just mentioned, manufacturing, et cetera, what you find is that most businesses are just built upon their financial management. That's it. They may have QuickBooks, they have a tool that allows them to see how much money was made, and that's where they are. So the opportunity that is there is for firms as ours to be able to give them more insight, more information, create connectivity between different platforms and systems to empower them to be able to make quicker and more impactful decisions. So I see that as a way how we are positively impacting businesses.
Thank you. Cleavon.
Good afternoon to everyone. Some of well, of course, my colleagues would have mentioned some of the areas that, in the specific industry. And I think one of the things that, for instance, we are doing at Meteorelic, we have a HR and payroll software service that is built right here in Grenada, but of course, will be spreading across the Caribbean very soon. And some of the infrastructure and the connectivity that we have here has really laid that foundation to be able to establish that sort of platform and so on. So, but on top of the strategies that you mentioned in terms of allowing for strengthening the space, I think one of that is, of course, innovation follows demand, and I think some of the opportunities that even government is doing is maybe to invest in local innovators as service providers that we are here, that we can be able to bring that international standard, that international ability that we know of. We already have proof that it's working here, and we can offer those sort of services as well too.
Toussaint?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. So at DataNexus, our approach is very data-driven, right? And what we do is we look at the data, we try to automate the process. And to come back to Ms. Cummings' questions, we think moving from connectivity to capability means for us in 3 different areas: collaboration between companies, in terms of also education, and in terms of citizen services. When we talk about the Caribbean, people have often seen its size as a disadvantage. I beg to differ. The fact that small islands are small makes it interesting and even easier for things to move faster. The government, the local ICT company, the consumer of the technology, everybody's within a very small geographical area. It means that this process could go faster, right? And in terms of cross-company collaboration, everybody cannot do its own thing. If you start one thing and another company start another thing, before you know it, we're trying to build apps rather than solve real-life problems. So, for example, with Sonova, we're working on a platform now that is revolutionary in terms of the health management system. So when companies come together and they work together, you could build more solutions that solve real problems rather than, and then this translates into economic advantage for the Caribbean. Because at the end of the day, that capability goes towards building the economic advantage, building the citizenship service, training the users of these services, because we could have all these fine systems. I could apply my passport online, my identity could be linked to my kid's own, but if those consuming those services cannot access it. For example, the Honorable Minister mentioned about the grant available. I don't think anybody knows, even I don't know, where is that information. So access to information is also another area where I think both local ICT companies and government and those consuming want to really put a focus on.
Thank you. So let's now take a deep dive. Many small and medium-sized businesses may not have the resources or in-house expertise to effectively manage cybersecurity and risk. How can local ICT companies support these businesses in strengthening their cybersecurity and, by extension, enhancing the customer service? Please be specific with your responses, including examples.
I think I'll go first. For small businesses, cybersecurity, of course, is a hygiene and not a big product purchase, right? And one of the things that you can see for small businesses, even for service provider, is actually packaging the cybersecurity offering that can work with, well, from the small business to the service provider so that they can have those sort of skill set. One of the things that we commonly see within small island development states, even the services that is offered is more of an enterprise base, and you have a high price tag. Grenada has a population of 110,000 people, and if you look at it from a user base or a system based perspective, that's 110,000 users, right? And not all at the same time will be accessing this. And I think some of the offerings and so on that we get really talks about enterprise base, and it's a very high price tag for small, medium-sized businesses. But of course, there are products and so on that can be used or packaged from a service provider perspective that the small business can engage with. Another idea, of course, is ensuring for a small business that they can access tools that already have cybersecurity built in. For us at Moderator, we are ensuring that we have those things and then, automatically building the multi-factor authentication, the verification of the user who accessing the system. We of course, on the day one, you heard that Brent mentioned things like Cloudflare and so on that can help mitigate some of the risk that is happening. So the tools that the small business is engaging with, of course, have it built in. And of course, my final point, if I'm being direct, is ensuring that small business, of course, train staff. You would hear Jarvis Dario mention multiple times that most of the risk is actually on the end user. So the person needs to be skilled to identify DNS attack, phishing, email phishing, and all of these sort of things that they can know that, these are not some of the things that you need to click on and so on so that they can protect the small businesses.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to chip in here. We're a platform provider. We provide core technology. I think the minister mentioned the 60+ young people who are trained in cybersecurity. I think while we can incorporate technology in our offerings, it's still a very small surface area. As we said earlier, the majority of the risk is in the people. So I would say that's a wide open area for new entrepreneurs to come in and create offerings. The 60+ people who are trained, I think it's an opportunity to come in and work with the small businesses to ensure that they look for the right things in the solutions that they're procuring, and also that they are applying the best practices within the organizations to mitigate such risks. But I see it as a wide open opportunity for young people who are specialists in cybersecurity to take advantage of, right? I have many examples. Sometimes you go to a bank, and one of those examples I like to share. A couple of years ago, and the person wanted a copy of a document, and I gave them a flash drive with the document, and they took it and plugged it into the computer, and and open it and access the file. I'm just saying that from a people standpoint, we have those wide open surface areas that can expose organizations to the threats.
Okay, so in the interest of time, I'm going to ask 2 questions. And This one, let's listen up for this one because we're going to be applying for those grants. Minister? Okay. For Grenadians who are considering starting a digital business, what advice would you give them, and what practical steps should they take to build a successful digital business?
I think I'll take this one.
Go ahead.
So, in terms of practical advice, I would say the first thing is don't go out and try to build the next whatever already exists. You need to focus on the problems that exist within our market, within the region. That's where you start. Many persons, you would say, and I can give you an example. We have probably about 5 or 6 ride-sharing apps in Grenada now, right? We probably have about 5 or 6. 7? Is that what? 7, right? So people are trying to solve the same problem, right? But there are tons of opportunities that really exist in the market that people need solutions to. So focus firstly on trying to solve a problem and not just trying to create the next cool solution that exists, right? That's one. The second thing is, and I think this is really big, build with distribution in mind. Don't just build with the focus that I'm going to create something and then after I'm going to figure out how it is that I'm going to get it sold. It's really, really important that you think in the beginning, just like you're considering cybersecurity and making sure that you have a system that is functional and secure, you should be thinking about who are going to be my customers, where are they going to be located, and what do they actually need so that they can utilize your system properly. That's really, really important because it's going to stop you from being able to grow if it is that you've not considered that, right? And then the last one, I would say is combining technical and business capability. I would encourage everyone, whether your background is on the IT side, engineering, whatever it is, or whether it is that you're on the business side, agriculture, whatever area, I would encourage you to look at your soft skills. That is really, really, really important. The ability to have a conversation, the ability to communicate what your need is, to connect with people, that really matters, right? Just the same, your ability to understand the product and the solution that you're creating, or to recognize when something is needed, that's really just as important. So don't consider it that I have to be a specialist in one area. Try to consume as much knowledge and information in every single aspect as possible. I consider myself a generalist. I've always considered myself that. And it's because I just consume information, and it has helped me significantly in life. So I would encourage you to definitely do that.
If I just build on what Mr. Cameron has said, and I also think one thing that I would consider positive is in the sense of while you're building a solution, you could be a generalist like Mr. Cameron, but focus on a solution that actually solves a real problem, right? You give us an example of 7 ride-hailing hubs with 100,000 population. Maybe some of those technologies or those companies could have solved some other problems, right? We have problems of sagas. When you drive around some area, there is the smell. There's technology that could be used to solve those problems. So we have problems of, payment infrastructures, peer-to-peer payments. We could put in all these skills in all of them. So I think that it is very important to think locally, build in Grenada, test in Grenada, but also think of yourself as in a wider environment of an international supplier. Whatever product that is you build there that works here, think of it as an international product. You can reach out to, we live in a very global village now. A solution here in Grenada could be scaled around the world, and that is where the capability, the economic growth starts to come in.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a couple points. One of the things that is happening now that AI has really created a space where you can create all the ideas that you have, and they are generating new ideas, new businesses on the fly. And as fast as they're generating, so too are they failing. But one of the things that is consistent over the years for all of the successful innovation that you see, starting with YouTube and how YouTube was starting, it's just one person trying to solve that problem that they had. For us at Meteorelic, for me, I wanted, as an accountant, I wanted an easy way to manage payroll. That's what it started as. I was trying to solve my own problem. And from then I said, okay, well, this is something that is a common problem across small businesses. And then I move on to offering the services. And I wanted to solve that problem because, of course, our tax or regulations are complex. But then moving from solving that problem, the business community now has, they're asking for a single space for doing all things HR. So this platform has grown to solving that one specific problem to now offering things as leave management, payroll, of course, and other digital initiatives within that single platform. So I think if you're looking at ideas and innovation, it's not as such for wealth mostly, but actually picking that right problem that can live the test of time, of course, but of course that is something that is very important and critical that can be distributed across many other space and other businesses.
I would be very short with this one. It's focus. You could do, especially technical people, you could do a lot, right? Especially if you could code, you could build anything. And with AI now, you could build anything you want. But focus is very, very, very important. And so I just wanted to put that out there to you. If you're working on a solution, give it a fair chance to succeed. All right? If business A comes to you and say they want solution B, and another one wants another solution, you can't do everything. All right? So focus on what you're good at least to get started. You have limited resources, so you want to channel it properly. And then you could go wider after. But I think focus is a key takeaway for you.
Thank you. The final question. What specific outcomes would you like to see over the next year that will demonstrate Grenada's ICT sector is moving in the right direction? So I'm going to repeat the final question. What specific outcomes would you like to see over the next year that will demonstrate Grenada's ICT sector is moving in the right direction?
Do you want me to take that?
Go ahead.
Okay, I could take that first. I think that in three different ways, like I said earlier, government leads the way in terms of policies, but innovation has always been ahead of policy. It always comes last. I would like to see a stronger and more structured environment where the government and the ICT companies, and I don't want to say the word local in this case because local tend to have a negative connotation of not being up to par. But most of us here have clients internationally or have worked with international companies at one point or another. So we could say home-based or homegrown ICT companies where government partners with them, they see them on par with international ICT companies. They see them worthy of big projects that drives and changes lives within the Caribbean. I think the other sector that I'm focused on, education has always been my passion. And like I said earlier, if you build all these fine products and all these fine services, and the user are not up to par, a solution is as good as those using it, right? So government should look at, and ICT companies also, educating citizens to ensure that solutions that are available, they can take the best and the full advantage of it. And thirdly, I think more just government-private partnership, because at the end of the day, the size, we should be considered a positive thing. It makes sure it's easier to collaborate and to work together.
I'm going to add, well, there's two things on my end. I would say a cohort of young people that would lead the next generation of innovation. And not just for Grenada, I think the wider Caribbean need that. So whether we mentor or as, aspire them to become innovators, solving problem. I think that is critical, and it's much more critical because of what is actually happening with AI. I think AI is really losing our critical thinkers within the region. I think we need to kind of strengthen that to help us solve that next wave. So within that year, at least lay that foundation to have that cohort of young people. And I would say for Grenada specifically, within that 1 year, is to actually have the Digital Transformation Agency up and running. And most so important, and you would have mentioned that collaboration, and there are service providers here who are doing international great work, phenomenal work, but the agency do not have to figure out all the entire operation aspect of how that services. The service providers are here to engage and start building out those sort of services. So that is the two I would say added to that list.
Yeah, for me, I think we have to change the language around technology. I think for many, many years, if you listen to how most of our leaders speak about it, it's really technology to support what government is doing. But I think we should start looking at technology as a cocoa, as how we look at tourism, as nutmeg, revenue-generating opportunities for the country. The language has to change. Or we just see it as something that we just support on the side, but no real effort going into developing it as a sector that could really be transformative for the country. Right? So I think the language has to change. We have to want it. We have to want it bad enough to make a case for it when we're procuring our projects. And we had a conversation yesterday on our table, and we were looking at the spend nationally on technology, platforms. All of us here are hiring local Grenadians. Among us, 20 plus, 30 plus people. And how many of us benefited from or got the opportunity to work on any one of the major technology software or technology projects that's over $1 million? None of us, right? But tens of millions of dollars are spent. So we have to ask ourselves, are we really serious about pursuing this sector as one for growing our economy? And unless we see that way, we would continue talking about it as something we just want to support on the side to get the young people involved and whatnot. But if we really take it serious, I think all the 60-something young people that were trained, they would be seriously engaged. The TAMCC students that are graduating with a technology-related degree, they wouldn't be going to find odd jobs. They would find opportunities because there is a budding sector behind them to occupy them, to consume them. All right, so we need to change the language. It has to be a serious discussion around how we procure technology. We have to be deliberate on giving our homegrown solutions an unfair advantage. And I say it with no regret. We have to give our locals, regional providers an unfair advantage because the truth be told, we can't compete with the multinationals, right? So we have to have an unfair advantage, and that should be through our national identity, our regional identity, right? But I think there is a huge opportunity. If we have one success story here, we don't have enough people to employ. We don't have enough people. You can never produce enough people to employ. So there is an opportunity. I think we should really be serious about taking advantage of it.
Well said. For me, let's give him a round of applause. Well said. Two things. I'll try to be as quick as possible. The first one, well, I'm really encouraged by what was presented today by the minister in terms of the Digital Transformation Agency. What I would like to see a year from now is that we have more opportunities for pilots and incubators where it is that we can bring in the young people and give them an opportunity to actually solve the problems that exist within our country and within our region, and they can be supported in that way. Because that's really, I would say, what's one of the big things that's missing. It's a financing, someone to back them, So I would encourage that that be one of the arms that is considered. And the other thing is, I would like to see more, Chad touched on it a little bit, I would like to see the country benefiting from the ICT sector, from software development. We have the opportunity to be able to create things and solve problems in the world and transform our economy. There could be somebody sitting here right now that has a unicorn. It can happen, it's real, if you actually look at problems that exist and try to solve them. And that can transform a country, can transform Grenada, the entire region, significantly. So I would like to see more businesses that are exporting their services, not just building to solve one problem in one corner, but for the entire region and even internationally. That's what I would like to see a year from now.
So thank you to our panelists, Hussein, Chad, Cameron, Cleveland.
Tia, if you don't mind, one little addition. Yeah.
Okay, one little addition, because I know you from donkey years. Yeah? So one little addition.
I must say, the minister, spoke about private sector involvement, and we are always available and willing to be a part of the conversation, to be a part, not only the conversation, because we move beyond conversation, to be a part of the implementation. Right? So I think just engage us. We are willing. We have been involved in the Digital Transformation Agency consultancies and helping to define what that should look like. But we are willing. We're raising our hands because we want to see the sector grow as much as the government and everybody does. I just wanted to put that and volunteer our services to supporting the government.
Okay, so on that note, I'm going to make one little addition. Minister, Chad and I did our undergrad together, and he's excellent at maths. So he will be very good at helping us collectively with that idea, to support gamification and other things. So please join me in thanking our panelists. Right, so we're out of time, but let's continue. Okay, Chairman?
Thank you very much. Just a quick statement and an announcement. The NTRC has recognized the tremendous value and the fact that we don't know what we have in terms of development. And we discussed the possibility of bringing the developers together, and with the input from our minister, we have allocated $1 million Eastern Caribbean dollars from the Universal Service Fund. And the legislation governing how it is used, we had to get the permission from the contributors to the fund. These are the licensed providers. We have spoken with 2 of the 3 who have already given their support to this initiative. We have not structured it totally, so we want to bring a core together to decide what the scope of that undertaking would be, and then open it wider and use that $1 million Eastern Caribbean dollars to assist developers in bringing to life solutions to challenges which they have encountered. And this includes what we did with the girls in ICT, where we had the schools developing AI solutions to challenges. And we want to take a portion of that to assist the schools in bringing to market, if possible, some of the initiatives which were identified. And Cleven was a judge in that undertaking, and we're moving forward with that. The second thing I want to mention is the fact that you're in the private sector, really. And I'm wondering if the Chamber of Commerce, for example, should not have a unit within them, that where you can have all of you as members of the chamber forming that unit, technology unit within them, which would open you to greater possibilities in things like participating in ICANN, and all of these other areas. So this is something you should think about, and at the same time, stick with us to get that initiative going. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Chairman. So let's continue the discussion over lunch. Thank you again for your insights to our panel, and I will hand over to our moderator, MC.
Thank you very much. Panelists, thank you. Remain on stage. Thank you as well, Moderator Tia Cummins. Ladies and gents, Tia Cummins is a consultant at the National Telecommunications Regulatory Commission in Grenada. So it's a photo up right now.